Today on Metaphysical Mississippi, we have Bayleigh Shafer and Megan Ravenscroft. We'll be discussing family relationships, mother-daughter, how metaphysical viewpoints fit in there, and how rebuilding relationships that may have been once severed have come back together. So stick around. Yeah, hey Bayleigh. Hey Megan.
Nice to have y'all on.
Yeah.
So this is a very special episode. I think this is our first mother-daughter. Yes, we've had sisters on before, and we'll probably have Megan back on another time to have another sisters talk. But today she has her daughter, Bayleigh, with her, and Bayleigh is shall I tell everyone, is expecting a baby any
Working
moment.
on it. Yeah. About to pop any day.
Now, so this is exciting. So actually we have in the room
We have
mother, daughter, and grandbaby.
and grandbaby. Yep. We don't, not sure if it's a girl or a boy yet, but
Oh, so it's going to be a surprise.
Yep. We decided to wait on it. We've got the information on the envelope and on an envelope in our fridge, and so we were like, oh, we'll wait a little bit longer, but it definitely kind of sits there and taunts us a little bit. We're like, ooh, we could look.
Just stick it out. Yeah, at this point.
Like, we made it this far.
Oh, that's exciting.
I feel like I know, but
yeah,
we'll see how accurate it
is. And Megan, is this your first grandchild?
It is. Yep.
Oh,
first grandbaby.
So exciting. So exciting.
Yeah.
So we know you. A lot of our listeners from the South can probably tell that you both are not from the South. So tell us. Well, before you tell me where you're from and what you do, I want to tell the audience how we met. What is our official title? Megan is my sister-in-law's sister. So,
that is right.
So my husband's brother's wife is your sister.
Yeah, good job.
Wife is your sister, and we have met once before at their wedding. That was over 20 years ago. So, I've kept in touch with Mandy, her sister, over the years, and I occasionally see them at family holidays. But this is just my second time to be in visuals with Megan, and this is just so exciting. It's just so interesting how life comes in phases and stages and comes full circle. And it was through the podcast we kind of reconnected from that first short initial encounter and introduction. And I'm just so excited. You and I have had a phone call, and you've got a lot of really exciting things on the horizon that hopefully we can talk about today. But I think today's main topic is talking about female family relationships and going through different phases and cycles in our life. And we might, with the holidays coming up, we may touch on ancestors and dealing with grief of losing loved ones. Because around the holidays, that seems to kind of come up with a lot of us in our lives. So let's go. You've been wanting to talk, and
yeah. Hold on. So Megan and Bayleigh, when Krista first mentioned wanting to come on the show and learning just a little bit of your backstory, which you are going to share, hopefully. But just, I hope we can explore how our maternal links, both in the past and the present, and what's to come in the future, frames your outlook on life. And Megan, if you want to begin just sharing a little bit about your spiritual awakening journey, you can. And then Bayleigh, chime in.
Well, I guess it kind of started for me back in 2 years ago when our mom, Mandy and his mom, got sick with COVID, and my dad was sick at the same time also. And Dad made it out of the hospital and Mom didn't. And I was so fortunate to be able to be there. I looking back on it now, I can see where we were at the right time, at the right moment, just the right people were there. And they had let me in to be with my mom. So I was able to be with her the entire week. She was in the week and a half. She was in the hospital.
So was she, what do they call it, on the ventilator? Was she on the?
She had signed a DNI, so that was do not intubate. And so she had progressed to the point where she was definitely needing external help with breathing. And so they put her on a BiPAP machine and had taken her to the emergency, or to the ICU. And so she was in there, and what ended up happening was her lung ended up rupturing. And so it was kind of a long process until she finally did transition and she passed on.
But that experience that you were able to, so many people were not able to be with their family.
The gratitude I have around that is tremendous. And I just see that I was meant to be with her at that time. And everything just aligned perfectly. And the thing that looking back on it now, that I see as such a gift was, I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and 2 of my siblings were there with us, and there wasn't even kind of a question. It was just, Megan's going to go be with Mom. And they all graciously kind of just stepped back and said, no, you need to go be with Mom. And it was just kind of such a gift that was something we didn't even really have to talk about. It just, Mom and I had a special soul connection. Her and I were.
Well, and all of the siblings through that entire time, me just kind of watching, I got to be there right after Graham passed is when I pulled into town. And her timing on that was perfect too. Yes. But I just getting to watch it, it was so beautiful because all 4 of the siblings so naturally just fell into their roles. And there was really no like in-depth discussions, no fighting or anything like that. Just all 4 of them just went, this is my role, this is my role, this is my role, this is my role. And they just did everything that needed to be done. And there was no hesitation or anything. And just for me, getting to just watch that was like, wow, really impressive, because I don't think a lot of families have that, where kids just kind of drop in and start doing what needs to be done right away and helping.
No, and I know her, Megan, your mother saw it, whatever point she was on in her transition, she felt that, she knew that, and I'm sure that meant a lot to your dad too, for y'all just to come in and do what you need to do. And that is not, no, you're right, Bayleigh. Sadly, that is not the norm. In many times there's at least one sibling that's you know
the problem child.
Or sometimes be a problem, but they all for logistic reasons or whatever can't come and help. So or can't come in the way they that's needed. But it sounds like all the bases were covered by the 4 siblings. Everything got taken care of, and what a beautiful gift to your mother, Megan, that for that to be the case. And so it's been, so it's, was it around the holidays?
It was December 4th.
December 4th. So yes, we're very close to that 2-year anniversary, and to be able to look back now and see that with the clarity, with fresh eyes. What a beautiful gift.
I didn't realize you were on the younger end because I'm the youngest daughter. I have a younger brother, but I too, in our mothers, took that role of being with mom and being there for her at the last as well. And so maybe that is a younger, and I have no regrets about it either.
To me, I was actually able to be with my mom when her mother passed, and we were able to keep grandma at home and take care of her and let her pass at home with us. And I think that experience, that was 20 years ago. So my mom and my grandma both passed at 72 years old, same age.
Wow.
And
it's kind of the same way.
There's an immense amount of synchronicities that have happened around it. And then I just really feel like being there with my mom, because my mom was a nurse, I was able to watch her and really, really take in how she took care of her mom in that transition time. And so I kind of feel like I got to learn from the best coach. So she kind of set it up. She's like, I taught you kids, so here's what you do.
Yeah. And that's something, we experienced losing our mom was in the hospital when she passed. And then my husband and your sister's husband's mother, Peggy, she had cancer and died at home on hospice care. And, it is as weird and twisted as this may sound to someone who's never experienced it. It is a beautiful process and a beautiful experience. At the moment, it's hard and it's grief and the suffering and the loss, but to be there. I wasn't actually with either one of them at the moment they passed away, but we were coming and going, and it really is almost as beautiful as the birth and it is a rebirth, basically. That is a rebirth. And so you went through this with your mom, losing your mom, and I'm sure you had a period of time to just catch up with life, to deal with the grief and to catch up with life. So, but how has that changed? So she passes away. Lay things to rest.
I kind of it's been a quite the adventure since my mom has passed away. I have since sold. We had properties right next door to each other and houses, and we ran our cattle and livestock together. And after mom's celebration of life, she had told me so much while she was in the hospital, and we had so many talks, and she kept telling me, don't wait. Create your life and create the life that you want to live. Don't wait till you retire. Don't wait till you're old and you don't have the capacity to live life. And so I really heeded that. And then I also just had this stirring and this craving inside of me that I needed to go explore. And so I sold basically everything I owned and packed up and moved back to Montana and have been traveling a tremendous amount since. Wow. I'm just following my intuition and following my guidance, and wherever I feel called to go or wherever I feel called to be, I trust in that and I go. And seeing the signs and seeing where my mom has showed up this whole year, she's been right by my side. She has been helping to create this healing that, I guarantee her hand was in this with Bayleigh and I, because the way our relationship was, at her celebration of life, Bayleigh ended up leaving without us even saying goodbye to each other. We just parted ways and went, I don't know what we need, but we knew that what we were doing was not working.
Yeah,
it was not healthy.
We pretty much just looked at each other and we're like, we can't do all that anymore. We need to walk away from this and take a break. And we kind of, all three of us did it too with my sister Jessie when Graham was so, I mean, like she said, we lived right next to each other. So she was so involved in our lives and so involved in our relationships that when she passed, it was like you described it last night, it was like an anchor just got lifted up in all three of our lives. And all three of us just kind of went away from each other for a while. And
well,
then
I think that happens when our, I know with my mother-in-law, grandmother, when they passed, they were a glue. And now me and you and Jennifer, we did kind of stay close, but yet there were times when we needed to be apart. It's almost like you need to disconnect for a little while. You need to go figure out and sort and process all the emotions and frankly trauma that gets brought to the surface when one of our loved ones pass away, especially when that loved one was someone who did hold everybody together. And Bayleigh, sir, are you Megan's oldest? Are you the oldest child? Okay. Yeah. I've got daughters. and I was the oldest, and me and my mom, we had our and then me and my oldest daughter, we had our and I mean, love her, you know, sweetest young lady ever, but yeah, mother-daughter relationships can be dicey, can be dicey. And so Megan, so y'all were living in Montana, correct? Not Montana, Oregon.
Yeah, we were living in Oregon near because I had gotten a divorce, and so 8 years ago we had moved back to Oregon to live right next door to my mom and dad, and they helped me out with the kids tremendously, and so they were pivotal in me being able to leave the marriage and then in raising the kids. So it was a very tight-knit community group tribe that we had with mom and dad. They were,
and even before the distance between, because we lived in the Bitterroot Valley of Missoula, Montana is where we lived, and then they lived in Oregon. So even that distance, my entire childhood, I was so close with my grandma and my grandpa, and they were always a part of our lives. And like they'd drive over and drop off a horse trailer with some animals in it for us, and we'd drive over and drop off a horse trailer full of animals in it for them.
So yeah, your parents were not farmers. I mean, they weren't farmers. They raised they lived out on a farm.
Oh yeah,
farmers.
Yeah. I was telling Bayleigh this is the first time in my life I've never been responsible for an animal.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Not
first
even
time ever.
Not even having a dog or anything.
Yeah.
Freedom to come and go, because I don't think I've had an animal with me as an adult, since I became an adult. As soon as I moved out, as soon as I left home, I got a dog, and I've had pets ever since. And right now I have 5 cats and 3 dogs, about to have a 6th cat. So yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, we're preparing to move in together because Bayleigh and her husband are moving back to Montana, and we're going to live multi-generationally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have 2 dogs, so we'll be.
Yeah. They're yah to the animals. They're not your pet, though. They're not your babies. They're their babies.
Yep. They're mine.
Bayleigh's fur babies.
They're my fur babies, but I'll share.
So before your mother or grandmother's scene, was religion or
a belief system?
How did you both evolve into
where you are now.
Yes.
Yeah. We were definitely very Christian, very Christian, but always, at least for my mom and I, we always kind of had questions outside of it. We kind of struggled with the Christian religion and stuff, and kind of had a hard time with parts of it that were being portrayed to us. So we always kind of had this like, what's really going on here? But we always had our conversations and our own relationship with God, but we had such a hard time finding the religious side of it, because we were like, oh, we're not really Christian, but we hear God and we talk to God. And that was kind of always the thing. But like Graham, she had very, very strong conversations. My first introduction to God was, I was little. I was probably 8 or 9, maybe even younger than that.
Could have been younger than that.
Yeah. And my grandma was in town visiting, and they were sitting in their room, and I just had this moment. I was upstairs playing with my barn and had all my animals set up, and I was a very realistic kid. I didn't have unicorns or anything. I had a structured farm that I played with in my room. And I just remember having this moment where all of a sudden I was up and I was watching myself playing, and I was like, oh, okay, this is weird. And then it was this, you need to go ask them about me. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I got up and I remember so vividly watching the back of my head walk through my house, and I went into the room and they were sitting on the bed together, and they had your and Graham's Bible out, and I walked in and I opened up the door and I said, can somebody introduce me to God? And I just stood there, and I remember the look on her face. She turned like pale and her eyes got huge. And my Graham just turned and looked at me, and she goes, absolutely, and pats the bed. And I hopped up on the bed, and I just remember she was looking around like, this child, what is happening? And then immediately you were just like, yeah, let's talk.
Well, it was the timing of you walked into that conversation, but my mom and I were having a conversation, and for you to walk in at just that right time, it was like, what is happening?
Yeah, I always wondered what that moment was, because I was so little. I just walked in. I was like, I'm just doing what I'm told, going where I'm supposed to go.
So maybe you don't have to share with us what the conversation was, but I wonder. So, what is your interpretation of that divine timing of her coming in? Was it that she just needed to come in there because of the point of the conversation you were in with your mother, or was it that it was the divine timing for you? Was the divine timing for Bayleigh? For Bayleigh. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. At that time, it was like she said, the look on my face was like, whoa. But now the divine timing, the synchronicities, the people being at just the right place at the right time to meet the right people at just the right moment, that happens so frequently, and I see it and I'm more aware of it now. So it just, I don't have that surprised look on my face anymore when it happens. I'm just, now I'm expecting it. Now I'm like, I set it up for it. I'm like, even like with the baby coming, my biggest prayer and ask is that this baby come at just the right time, at just the right place, with just the right people who need to be there to help support her and this baby coming as best as can be. And there's so much trust in that when you see it happen continually. It's you can kind of place a lot of trust in that divine synchronicity and the coincidences that are not coincidences.
Yeah.
So Megan, when you and Mandy were growing up, were y'all like go to church every Sunday kind of people, or was it just
Well, it's interesting because my mom and dad are they're strong, passionate believers. They met doing youth group together. They were youth group leaders. They were each other's first and only loves, and quite the sweet story. But we really weren't regular churchgoers. We just knew that, it was like something we talked about a lot as a family. Mm-hmm. And then one of my grandmothers on my mom's side was raised Catholic, but now since my mom has passed, my dad and I have gotten so much closer, and he started telling me about my grandmothers on his side and my other grandmothers on my mom's side. And it actually turns out that one of my grandmothers was persecuted as during the Salem witch trials, and two of her sisters were hung for being witches. Wow. My grandmother was exonerated, and so as soon as I started going through this awakening process, I started telling my dad things that were happening and experiences that were happening to me or with me. And he started telling me about my grandmothers and about my aunts and about all of these people. He's like, oh, that sounds exactly what your grandmothers used to do, or that's what your grandmothers used to say. So making those connections this year in preparation for myself becoming a grandmother has been divinely timed. I mean, it's amazing.
So this wasn't talked about around the dinner table when you were younger.
Right. No, it wasn't. It wasn't talked about. And I remember the first time that I spoke with somebody on the other side of the veil, and that first experience was I didn't know what had happened. I was so like, I don't know. And do you tell people, or are they going to think you're crazy? And so I went to my dad's house, and I was hanging out there, and I came out of taking a bath, and I looked at my dad and I just started crying. And I was like, Dad, I had this experience and I don't know what to think of it. And he just hugged me, and he was like, your grandmothers could do the same thing. And, this has happened to this person. And he just made it normal. Beautiful. And he just gave me the biggest hug, and he's like, tell me all about it. And so he was very loving and very open.
And not judgmental of it.
No. I actually say it was 2 months before my mom passed away. I did jokingly say, Mom, please don't go before Dad, because I don't know how to take care of him. We weren't that close. And and now, since my mom has passed, I consider my dad one of my best friends.
And maybe she had to leave in order for you to get close to him. That was
absolutely.
Is he still back in Oregon, or?
He is. Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's just taking some time trying to figure out what he wants his next chapter of life to look like.
And he could still have a few chapters left. I mean,
oh yeah.
Were you having experiences before your mother passed away, but you just kind of blew them off, or just kind of life's too busy? I know when you're raising a family, have young kids, when you're a young adult trying to find your way in life, you kind of ignore those things sometimes. So
yeah, I had a lot of looking back now and knowing what I know now, I can look back and go, oh, that was this experience happening, and I shut it down because it was scary, or because I didn't know how to process it or what was happening. And I've tried to kind of look back through my life to see if anyone ever told me like that it was not okay to believe that way. And the biggest thing was I could think that there was a fear of the unknown, and it seemed like there was this underlying we can talk about things to a certain extent, but as soon as you said tarot cards, or as soon as you said
Ouija board,
Yeah, as soon as you say certain words, they tend to trigger feelings and memories and emotions within other people, and then you can see that kind of that instant shutdown.
Yeah,
we're not safe to talk about that.
Which in the history in that is just like mind-blowing when you get looking back through history and in the churches and everything and the like witch trials, and kind of now we can look at it and go, oh, that was a way to kind of eradicate an entire way of life, an entire way of passing down traditions. And it was all based out of fear, was to get rid of it. And it's amazing to me when you look back how I'm a total dork. I love like history and stuff like that's kind of my thing. So I love looking back at it, and just you read it and you read everything that was said and everything that was written down and the understandings that people had of it then. It was such a fear-based thing that it was like, get rid of it, don't talk about it. And it was such a thing within the church that then it kind of spun back around, and it was like, oh, wait a second, why are we doing this? And it's amazing how many people still hold on to those fears that are hundreds of years old, that they don't even necessarily realize that why they're hanging on to it. It's just because it's something that's been spoken and passed down. And I run into that all the time with people where I'll kind of like try to find the right words to kind of go around what, like, meditation is a big one for me. Whenever I say meditation, people immediately like get kind of weird. Yeah. And then I kind of go back and I'm like, well, it's a meditative prayer, and try to dance like it back around. And I'm like, why are you scared of this? And it's always interesting because usually by the end of the conversation, people will just kind of sit there looking at me like, that made sense, but I don't really love that made sense.
Yeah.
And it's so wild to me. It never it never ceases to amaze me. And then hearing her talk about just her own realizations and clicks and stuff like that, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, the history on that. Wait, if you know this, then it'll make so much more sense.
It's really great because I'm not a fan of researching things, so I just go, hey, Bayleigh.
Yeah.
I like to research the facts, but then I try not to go too far down the rabbit hole of people's interpretations of the facts, because I want to be able to let guidance guide me, and me know that is my guidance, not regurgitating what someone else
said. Oh, exactly. Finding that balance in asking, because I try to just ask them, like, if information, like, here's like through my pregnancy, it was always a big thing for me to just like, I'm not an anxiety, I'm not a stressful, I don't need to know everything, I'm good. I'm like, if it'll come to me when it's meant to come to me. And I kept that mentality throughout my whole pregnancy, and the things that pop up and the things I started to learn, just like, oh, pick up this book. And when you're open to the information coming in, it is amazing how much will get shown. Or somebody will make a comment and you'll go, oh, hey, where did you hear that? And they'll give you all your information, and then you can kind of get absorbed in it, and you're like, this is so good. This is what I needed to hear.
Yeah. So if you try to do everything by the book, you're going to go into premature labor from stress and anxiety. So
yeah.
And that's the same thing with life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and that's the part that really kind of bummed me out with pregnancy a little bit, was seeing how many women were just like, nope, I am regimented and I am told what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, have you ever stopped to just like ask, is this what my body needs? Is this what my, like, the one thing I was always told was like, you're not supposed to eat sushi. You can't eat sushi. I freaking love sushi. And fish is such a great way to get like your omegas and your fatty acids, which is so important in the first in your first trimester when your baby's brain is developing. And I got looking into it, and I was like, God, I really feel like I should be eating fish and should be eating different foods. And I'm like, God, but why is everything telling me not to do this? And so I kind of sat with it for a little bit, and then I found that's when the information came in, and there's really only like 5 fish that you can't eat, and they come from the ocean, and that's really it. But like freshwater fish, eat them all day long, like that. And once I got that information, it kind of just bummed me out, because I was like, oh, how many women go into the hospital and are told, you just can't eat, you can't eat fish, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, or you have to take the pills, you have to take the supplements, but you can't change up your diet, like all sorts of crazy stuff that it just kind of made me sad. And I think I just always have wanted to give everyone, like, there's this awareness that you can have, take in the information, but sort it for yourself.
We're talking about, you being an expected mother, but I also see similarities in just walking a day-to-day life. Like, we're going to follow this checklist like we have control.
Yeah.
And we do not, because you can eat possibly, but I mean, you can follow every good health thing, and then you divinely are riding your bike down the road and get hit by a car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, really, and I'm not saying it takes responsibility away. There are laws, laws of gravity or whatever, but common sense. When we lost our mother at an early age, she was religious about everything. Didn't eat this, didn't eat that, extra, and controlled her intake, but didn't control what she gave away. She, therefore, she died young.
Yep.
Because of, I'm just like, that to me, I mean, when you look at me, I'm not the spitting image of health, but I feel pretty
good. Yeah. And that's
why I'm amazed at her, because she may be a little overweight, but she's hardly ever sick. She feels, most days she has aches and pains, but she feels good. My husband is a smoker and eats fast food every day, and he's hardly ever sick.
He's so different than his brother.
So different than his brother.
Yeah. You can just become religious in so many things. And when you're, if you're going into New Age, let's not get too religious about the New Age community either.
No,
but the intuition and listening to your
own inner guidance.
I like how people say it's your practice. It's your practice.
And
go on.
It's your body is meant to serve you and however you want to live your life. If that's climbing a mountain every single day, then there are certain steps that you're going to have to follow every single day to make sure that your body can do it. And if that's what makes you happy, awesome. If you're happy staying at home and doing your projects and working on your crafts and you're happy doing that, then you're going to follow whatever it is that your body needs to do that. And it always makes me so sad whenever people start, I gotta look a certain way and I have to be physically fit. And it's like, well, you only have to be physically fit if you want to be physically fit. Like, yeah, you only have to do that if that's what makes you happy, if that's what's going to serve. Like, I do yoga religiously, not so much anymore because I'm a little bit big. The weight came on really fast over this last month and I really slowed down. But I loved being physically active, getting out, moving, climbing. Like, I love it whenever I get that weird hiker's high and my legs hurt and my legs are shaking. That was my thing. Like, I loved it. So I was riding a bike every single day and I was doing yoga every single day. And part of me was kind of nervous going into the pregnancy because I wasn't very healthy through high school. I'm actually at my high school weight now at 9 months pregnant. So it kind of like, it wasn't very healthy through high school, got super healthy and then got pregnant. And there was a little tiny part of me in the back of my brain that was like, oh, is this going to be a problem for me? Like, am I going to slip into a depression or anything like that? And it is amazing how just accepting the phases of life that you're in and just being like, oh, okay, like now's not the time for me to be crazy active. And I'm okay with the weight that I've put on. I'm good with it. Like, accepting that and going, maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I won't come back to it. Maybe this is, accepting the phases that you go through and listening to your body on what those phases need. Because if I wasn't pregnant, I could not be eating as much food as I am right now. I'm up to like 4 meals a day.
I am just so, wow. I wish I knew this wisdom that you're living out when I was your age. Oh my gosh. I mean, because I'm 51 and now I'm, just learning this. So kudos for you for figuring it out. So
thank you.
Child. I mean, before you figure, I mean, that's great. Because usually we don't figure out what the heck we're doing until our children are graduating high schools.
Until they're just about gone. Thank you. That means a lot to me.
I'm super impressed.
It's been quite the practice that we've, like, even, with her whole pregnancy, just watching her follow her intuition on it and watching her getting to experience and be an observer of how she is choosing to do this pregnancy so differently than I did, because I didn't know at the time. But basically she started through this whole process with this whole heightened awareness from the moment that the baby was conceived, and it just, the difference in it, like the other day I gave her a little Reiki session, and as we were working through it and I got around her hips, I just had this tremendous awareness of the strong, confident, powerful women we have had in our generations. And it was like I could feel the presence of grandmothers, and it was just like such a strong presence. And then I got this smell of bone broth, and I was like, oh. And then I could see teas, like making teas, and so I'd come out and told Bayleigh, or afterwards we kind of talked about it, and I said, I could smell, I think we need to make some bone broth. And she's like, yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So those little callings that we get, those little instincts that we get, is like, yeah, let's do that to prepare for her nutrition and her hydration. And so we've got big pan of bone broth and teas, and trying to follow the intuition to take care of her body as best as we can.
Yeah, well, and that's such a fun thing too, is like the confidence that I got, because I mean, kids are super intuitive. They're stupid intuitive that it's like almost scary sometimes. And so I felt like I'd always kind of had that kind of my whole life. And then when Graham passed, I've had so many, I almost felt bad when my grandma passed because I didn't cry. I didn't feel this great heaviness. My grandma and I had spent, I mean, my entire life, her passing was not a shy conversation. From the time I can remember being able to crawl up, being so small that I had to crawl up into the chair to get into her lap, and I'd curl up in her arms, and I remember always asking her, I'm like, so what do we do when you pass away? And that was always like a question that I had zero fear of asking her. And she would just so calmly tell me, like, well, you're gonna keep going and you're gonna be fine. And the other thing she would always tell me too is I was not to interfere. I was not, if it was her time, it was her time. We were not gonna fight to keep her around, because she would always ask me, like, she would say, would you want to keep me here and stop me from going on to something better? And I would always like look at her and I'd like, well, no, of course I don't want to, like, I wouldn't want you to do that to me. Like, and so her passing and stuff was always a conversation that we always had. And it was always so open that when she did pass, there was not a single part of me that really mourned. It was the moments when I was like, I wish I could turn and talk to her, that's when it would get me. But it never sat with me very long. And it would so quickly pass because I was like, I'd just sit there and I'd like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like send out a little thought to her. And that would always be my communication. And so it was really special to me that she was able to have those conversations and with me from such a young age, and that I was safe with her to ask her those conversations, because she didn't get offended and be like, do you want me dead? Yeah, like, why are you thinking about me dying? And she would just so calmly just like talk me through it. And like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. So when she did pass, I felt kind of bad because it didn't hit me very hard. I had my moments, but it was
You were
okay.
Be
Yeah,
prepared. Yeah, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
she had definitely prepared all of us in her own way, which was so beautiful. And then kind of sent me, I was home for a month and then with my family for a month, and then I went to my home, which is over in Portland, opposite sides of Oregon. I came back and stayed with them for a month, and then when I came home, she just kind of visited me throughout little moments. And I had this dream this one night that was just like really opened me up and really re-sparked my intuition and kind of just like gave me some more confidence. And it was all of us girls. We've got a big hodgepodge of a family. there's there's my mom has a tendency to attract stray kids. So I have a lot of siblings. I have a lot of siblings too. I have one blood sibling, but I actually have like 7 siblings. And we were in this dream, we were sitting around and we were talking, and all of us were at a different phase of life. Like one of my sisters was getting married, another one was about to have a baby, another one was about to graduate high school. So all of us, we had this wide range, and I was the only one that didn't really have a big life event came up. So in this dream, I was watching all the other girls go and talk to my grandma, and I was just kind of hanging back with whoever wasn't talking to Graham at the time. And all of a sudden, I came over and she reached through my dream, it felt like. And that was the first time I'd ever felt anything like this. And her hands, she was holding my hands and she was rubbing them, and she said, "It's gonna be okay. Just let it happen." And she just said that it's gonna be okay. And my husband actually had to wake me up. Well, his fiance, I can't remember what we were dating at the time, or
no, you weren't married because Graham wasn't.
Yeah, we weren't married yet, or weren't engaged yet either. But anyways, he actually had to wake me up because I was like sobbing. I was sobbing so hard in my sleep, and I was like couldn't breathe. And he real quick leaned over, and as soon as I could, I started stuttering the words, her hands, TJ. I had her hands, and she was pulling her hands away in my dream, and that's when I started to panic because I was like, no, like, give me those back. But she told me it's all gonna be okay. And I remember after that just having this like just this peace kind of come over me, and this confidence that was like, oh no, I got this. I just need to listen and just really like wherever life takes me, if something comes up, even if it feels challenging, I need to jump on it. And that was huge after that, because I had kind of backed out of my intuition, and I definitely kind of backed off of life a little bit and just found my comfortable routine. And I was like not really going and visiting family much. I was just like staying at home. And then when Graham passed, it kind of threw me all back into it and then threw me back out of it. And it definitely sent me on quite the whirlwind for a year, and then sent you on quite the whirlwind. And right around the time that you went on your trip and everything was all 3 of us kind of had this winter of just working through stuff, like really, really big stuff. And it was definitely kind of a depression for me. I really struggled. I had a really hard time, but I dove back into my past. I worked through stuff with my father that I thought I had worked through.
It comes in stages, we work we're done, and then it circles back.
Yep, and it comes back around, and it keeps coming back around. And it was so crazy because when she was on her 3-month trip, and yours, I was locked in a basement. Like I was hanging out at home going to work. I was not really doing much hanging out with my husband
I
and
took
stuff.
3 months and went and hung out in tropical places.
Yeah, she went off on it.
I went ham.
Yeah, but we each got this like 3-month. We kind of had our summers of wrapping up a few little things, and we weren't really talking much. And then at the end of the summer, we kind of came to a headway, and it finally, I remember you shot me a text, and I laid in bed and I cried all day until my husband got home, and I showed him the text, and he looked at me, and he's always been so love this man to death. I can't stop talking so highly of him, but he just very calmly looked at me and he goes, I think it's time for you to take a big step back. I think you guys need to be done. Need to be done talking. And that was right before my wedding. So I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, my mom and my sister was supposed to be a part of this. I don't understand. And right about then, we just really parted ways.
We had a lovely time at her wedding.
Yeah.
And I think it went really fine. And
it went beautifully. But it was my wedding was almost a time for us to just kind of have this agreement. Like we had a great time. We loved being around each other. We helped each other out. We did stuff for each other, but we kind of had this agreement of like, I'm just going to watch you for a little while. We don't have to be in contact. We don't have to be super close. Like we're just going to see what happens. And we kind of almost no verbal, really, any communication. We just kind of like nodded and took our step back. And then that was, let's see, I got married in September. And then that was when it sparked into our 3-month winter craziness. And I worked through stuff with my dad. I worked through stuff with her. And my husband was a great support. And that was when you kind of had your huge...
Well, I actually part of my trip was I went to Costa Rica, and I knew I needed help and I knew I needed direction, and I chose to do a psilocybin retreat. Yeah, so I did a 11-day deep ceremonial spiritual psilocybin retreat, and it changed my life. I came back a different person for sure. And
how many times I should be keeping up with this? This is probably the 10th time I've just got chills. Just and almost have cried almost 5 times. So your stories is just well, I think so relatable to so many people, but you know, and we in our relationship, even me and Emily and our other family members, it's okay to take some time apart. We went years where we were barely speaking. It's not like we had a big fight and just like, okay, I'm not talking to you. We just kind of like, okay, we need a break. Because when you are so okay, especially when you go through shared trauma or shared intense events. So there is some healing that does take place together with the people that you experienced them with, even if they weren't like this big traumatic, horrible thing, which is any kind of event that's life-changing. But and so some healing takes place together as a unit with those that you experienced it with, but then sometimes some of that healing has to take place away from them. But because you can't really feel, especially if you're empathic or you're very close to the people you experience them with, the lines get blurred about what's your trauma and what's their trauma. Like you hold so much for other people that you don't even know what's yours and what's theirs.
Yeah. And I was going to say that anchor, just like when your mother passed, we become anchors for each other. So it's really important when
every once in a while you got to pull that anchor up.
Yeah. Yep. We can support our own so we don't keep grasping onto the anchor.
Yeah. Well, it's also like a great way that I kind of love looking at it too is it's kind of like a garden. Like our relationship is the garden and we're constantly planting stuff, and you can't let something sit in the ground forever. It's going to rot. So you pull it up and look at it and go, okay, we were doing this and what was the product of that? And it worked really well. Look at this harvest. Or it's like, oh no, that was not really getting anywhere for
planted
us.
here. Just like the right place to be planted.
Yeah. And I think whenever people get looking at relationships is like, okay, you start it and you don't ever pull it up. You don't ever change it. It stays there and you let it grow and, you leave it there. I think when you get looking at it like that, it can be kind of limiting instead of like realizing like, oh, we're going through a really hard time. We gotta pull up that anchor, pull up that produce and look at it and say, okay, what actually is going on and what's actually feeding it and what's helping it grow and what's not. And that was, yeah.
The bad diseased part off.
Exactly.
Well, we've noticed too that the more you get attached to an outcome, Bayleigh keeps telling me this, Mom, quit getting attached to that. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's so much easier to say than do sometimes. But when we get attached to a certain outcome, or we get attached to how we think a mother-daughter relationship has to look for it to be successful, because that's all we know. And then there's this fear of like, do I ask? Do I say anything? Do I acknowledge it? Do I acknowledge that it's not working for me, but maybe it's working for them? But
yeah,
I think one thing like Bayleigh and I have just started doing is kind of acknowledging that big events are going to change our relationship. Like the day before she got married, I sat down with her and I said, hey, tomorrow you're going to be a married woman, and that changes things. What do you need from me, and what can I do to support you, and what do you not need from me? What are your boundaries? And because for me, acknowledging that she was now becoming somebody's wife, she was becoming a partner, she was joining in a union with her husband that was separate from me. But my goal is to always be able to orbit around my children without changing their trajectory, or without feeling like I need to influence their lives.
Yeah.
Just those acknowledgments and realizing that, yes, I'm her mother, but that doesn't mean I have the answers. And I learn tremendously from my kids.
Yeah, that's something I so firmly believe in. Like I had two very opposite spectrums in my childhood and my upbringing, very opposite spectrums. And my mom was always curious and wanted to talk to me and wanted to learn from me. My dad very explicitly told me multiple times in my life that I was not somebody he was going to listen to until I was 18 years old, until I was an adult. And so I didn't have anything to bring to the table for him. He knew it all, and he had no problem letting me know that he knew it all and that I was the kid. Whereas then I'd go to her and she would I'd say something and she'd go, say that back one more time. What did you just say? And that was something we actually struggled with a lot through high school or my high school experience, especially, is we had that type of open communication with each other where I was a human being. I wasn't something that she had to control. I wasn't something that she had to boss around. It was very open conversations. Like if I wanted to go to a party or something, and this broke a bunch of my friends in high school. Oh my gosh. If I wanted to go out to a party, it wasn't like, well, you can't do that. It was open communication. Okay, why do you want to go? Who are you going with? Can you be home at this time? Because I have to go to work tomorrow. And if you're not home by this time, I will be up worrying about you. Can you respect the fact that I have to work tomorrow and be home at this time? And I would say, yes. Or I'd be like, well, could we push it an extra hour? But
there was also a part that I did tell her, if I get an intuition that you should not be going somewhere, I need you to just trust me. And we had that happen one night where I told her, I was like, I do not feel good about you going to this friend's house, and I really would prefer you don't go. And then something ended up happening that evening that Bayleigh and I were like, wow.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was now, but
you were not meant to be there for that.
Yeah. But we had that open communication, and that was something that, like, for my friends, they didn't have with their parents at all. There was never that understanding of learning from, listening to, respect. It was just my way or the highway kind of thing. And I remember the first time I told my girlfriends, we were driving around and we were trying to find this party to go to because we were in high school and we want to go to a party, and they were we couldn't find anywhere to go, and then they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll drive up into the mountains and then we can have our drinks and we'll hang out. And I was like, we have to drive home. I was like, and we're planning on drinking. I was like, no, we're not gonna go drive in the freaking mountains and then try to drive back down by curfew. I was like, I'll just call my mom. And they all were like, they grabbed my phone and grabbed my arms and they were like, don't you dare. You call your mom and we're dead. And I was like, if I call my mom, I'm not gonna die. Like, I will be. Yeah, I was like, she is my safe person. I can call her and tell her, hey, we're stupid 18-year-old kids and we want to have a party. And I called her and I said, hey mom, we got a couple drinks, we're wanting to hang out, but we don't have anywhere to go. Could we go out to the property and just hang out in the back field? And mom was like, I don't love this, but what is your guys' plan otherwise? And I told her what our original plan was. I told her what plan B was. I told her what plan C was. And I was like, it's
none of them good plans.
None of them were good plans. And I was like, this is why we're talking right now. And it blew my friends' minds that my mom even had that conversation with me. And at the end of it, she said, okay, how many of there are you? And it was like me and four of my other really close girlfriends, and that was it. So there's like five of us. And she's like, okay, as long as it's not a huge rager, like, come on out to the property. Be safer.
As long as you're there, no driving. Everybody stays here. We're not getting out of hand, but
you can't break any of my shit. And I was like, sounds good. We won't break any of your shit. And we handed our keys over to her, and she was like, okay, like, I'll leave you guys alone.
I checked on them.
Yeah. And you were like, I'm not gonna bug you all night, but I'll look at you every once in a while. And we got to hang out, we got to have a good time. And that next morning, all of my friends were just mind blown by the fact that I was even treated, that at 17 years old, I was treated like an adult, and I got to have that conversation with her. And even that just blew my mind. And then, like, with her, I know I told my friends some of the conversations that we'd have, and they were like, oh, my parents would never listen to me on that topic. They'd never listen to what I had to say on that because I'm a kid. And then they'd tell me, like, well, I don't know anything about that. And I'm like, but you do. Like, why would you think that you're stupid? You're not stupid. You know things. And that's something that I learned from my mom so huge, was I felt safe to have those conversations. And that's because she stayed open and receptive to learn from me and to listen to me and hear those things. And that was from the time I was probably like 13 was my first realization on, wow, my mom is really cool for just chatting with me. And that I've known I wanted a family my entire life. And from that moment on, I was like, that's what I've got to do. Like, that's my keynote there, is I just have to listen and understand that I'm not always going to be the boss. And so it's been so fun. And I think
it's been an adventure, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of ways.
No doubt to be a wonderful mom. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
Excited about the new baby in the family.
I so much, and I want to be like you when I grow up.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to walk in to tune into that intuition that you have now just today for myself. That was very encouraging. With
Thank
the younger
you.
generation, though,
they have a lot to teach us.
Yes, they do.
Well,
I circle back to something I think I heard you say earlier, Bayleigh. So, so do you feel like with this pregnancy, has your intuition or spiritual gifts increased since the pregnancy?
Oh, yeah, yeah. They took off. So the timing of everything was so like, oh my gosh, we could probably write for a while there, you probably could have wrote an entire book over just one day of us sitting down and talking, like a full novel, because just the stuff firing off and connecting was insane. But so I had that kind of that confidence boost from that dream that I had with my grandma. And then when my mom went on that 3-month trip and we all went through our 3 months of our dark nights of the soul, pretty much was what all three of us had. Hers
Now,
were
when
in a
you
much
say the
sunnier
third one,
place.
with the third one, are you talking about your other sister?
Yes, yeah, my
Yes.
sister, yeah, my sister Jessie. And we all kind of went through it pretty good. And then at the end of her 3-month trip, it was so perfectly timed. I had that confidence boost from my grandma, and I think I needed that to get me through the 3 months. And then she showed up, and that was like a friggin' rocked ya. She went and visited all of us kids and came back and like visited me every single person when she came back from that trip. I got a phone call from my sister giving me a heads up because I was the second stop for her to come on. She calls me and she goes, so when mom shows up, she's gonna completely change your life. And I just want to give you a quick heads up on the fact to just roll with it. Just go with it. And I was like, okay. I was like, that was kind of the plan. And she goes, no, Bayleigh, like I'm not kidding. Like something big is gonna happen. And I was like, oh, okay, like we'll see what it is. I'm excited to talk to mom and see what this new path that she's on. And she gets into town, and right before she flew, the day before she flew in, I had decided to go off of my IUD and everything, a decision that my husband and I had made to track it and to get it figured out and everything. And then um, the night before we were like, well, okay, we've been tracking it for a while. I think we'll go ahead and have sex and it'll be fine because we've been tracking it. We know the pattern. And I get up to make breakfast with him. He was an arborist, so he'd get up at 5:30 to do breakfast. And we get up to do breakfast, and I go in, and it's the day before she gets here, and we're kind of nervous about it because we're like, oh, we haven't talked to her in 3 months, if like almost 6 even. So we're like, oh, what's gonna happen there? And I'm like, well, I'm gonna run upstairs and take my ovulation test I gotta take it every day, so I'll run upstairs and take it. I take it and I set it down, and it was almost like taking a damn pregnancy test. It rocked me when I looked over, and that line was bright pink, meaning that I was ovulating, and I was not supposed to be ovulating at the time. And I looked at my husband and I was like, hey, so when you get home from work, we really need to have a conversation. And I was like, we need to do that. And then I'm like, oh God, I have to pick my mom up from the airport. And I was like, okay. So I was kind of like, I felt bad, but I was kind of mentally preparing myself to be like, hey, mom, I'm going to give you $20, $40. Please take yourself out to dinner so that way I can talk to my husband about what we're going to do. Because it was literally the night before we knew we could take a plan B if we needed to. We had had the conversations before, we had had a negative test before, and we were bummed about it, but it was still one of those things that it was like, we need to sit down and talk because we still have time to make a decision if we feel like it's not good. And lo and behold, a snowstorm hits and locks her up in Seattle for the night. So then my husband and I got to have the night to talk. And I felt so bad, but she goes, I have to stay in Seattle and my plans are ruined. I got to try to get a hotel. And there's this little part of me that's like, oh, thank God. I really needed to have a night with my husband. And I felt kind of bad about it, but at the same time, I was like, oh, I'll take it. I'll take it. And we ended up having a super in-depth conversation, and it was great getting to spend that time with my husband. And we ended up chucking the plan B out the door, and then both of us paused and looked at each other, and we were like, did we just make an absolutely insane decision? And so it was such a great experience there. And then the next morning we go and we pick her up at the airport, and it doesn't really snow in Portland very often. So when it snows, it shuts everything down.
Well, I had to ride the train from Seattle down because it
shut down the airport
for so long.
And she gets off the train and she goes, oh yeah, most of the people on the train, we were all friends. We were hanging out in the airport. I met so many cool people. I was talking to everybody. And so she's all like bouncing around, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I had a crazy night last night. Like, I'm glad that you did too. But anyway, she shows up, and then we got to spend the next 2 days talking. And my sister was not lying even in the slightest, because those 2 days of us talking re-sparked my intuition in such a way, and re-sparked my confidence, because I got to see her in such a confident state. And I felt kind of bad. I feel bad about saying it because I never meant to make you feel bad about it, but I looked at her and I said, holy shit, this is the woman that I've been waiting to meet my entire life. I was like, I have been waiting to meet you. And I told her, I was like, I was just by the end of it, I was so mind boggled, because there were so many ages of my life, like from the time I was tiny, where it was like, oh my gosh, I caught a glimpse of you at one point. I caught a glimpse of you. And then I remember so vividly, it would like, I would see this version of her and I would hear this version of her. And then all of a sudden it was like fear would just go over her face. And then no, I'd like, wait, come back. I need that.
Putting those masks on that we do.
And just hiding in things. And so after those 2 days of us talking, I was like, oh, holy crap. Like, I can do this. I can be a mom. And I now had the ultimate key, where like I kind of got little keys where it was like, yeah, listen to your kids and like treat them like a human being, like they're their own human being. And then I had this huge key of like, no, you just need to be your authentic self in order to be the best parent. And you need to be fully in that all the time. And even if that means taking 3 months to go off to Costa Rica and recap 40 years of life. And so it was just so crazy to me, because it was after that, getting that dream from my grandma, having those conversations with her when she got back, I would just immediately knew the answers to going through this pregnancy and to going through parenthood and everything. And it was so huge to me, because there was also that little girl inside of me that healed so greatly, finally getting to sit down and have a conversation with the woman who every once in a while peeked into my life. You were always there, but having that authentic version of you peer in and out through my whole childhood. And then now you're just here all the time. And it never,
it's not peeking out, taunting you, playing peekaboo with you. No, it's more embodied, and I feel that in myself too.
Yeah. And after that, that's when all the crazy intuitive I was having. I mean, they talk about crazy pregnancy dreams, but when you go through a spiritual awakening while you're pregnant, whoa. Like, hormones and everything, the chemistry of a brain and a body, those are some powerful drugs on their own, but then throwing in the spiritual side of it was just like whole nother realm, that it really did feel like I went through a crash course of years that just like whoop, all down into one. And it's been such a fun.
In connecting with her, doing Reiki on her, because I did Reiki when she was first pregnant, even I think before I had my attunements. And man, that session was magical. And the connection with, even the connection I was able to tune in to the baby and the spirit around this baby, and kind of some of the baby's intuition was wow. It was getting to experience your child carrying a child and doing it on this intuitive level. Wow. That's a gift. That's a true gift.
And it's been so huge for me, because God, just having you as like an anchor and stuff, and just not even necessarily an anchor, but just as a support and as such an open and honest support is just like just totally different than the stories that I hear other women say. I'm like, I want to duplicate you and like give you to everybody as I've wanted to do my entire life. I had friends in middle school and stuff that would come over literally just to hang out with my mom. Like they'd show up and I'd just kind of like, oh hey, and they'd be like, oh hey, I'm not really here for you. I'm gonna go hang out with your mom, and I'd be like, peace. Like she's down in the shop. I'm gonna go to my room. Go do what you're gonna go do.
Not to downplay your experience, Bayleigh, or that this is all about you, because it is all about you, because our path is all about us or as an individual. I'm gonna get a little woo-woo here.
No, you're good.
Do you feel like this child that's coming in, new human that's about to take its first official breath in this incarnation, has brought you
Mm-hmm.
a gift to
the gift of timing in this is Bayleigh and TJ, when they were dating, they had gone through some challenging times, and Graham was the one that my mom was the one that came, and she was pivotal in reminding Bayleigh to focus on the love and to focus on
I can hands down say I would not be married to TJ if it wasn't for my grandma.
Yeah. And so Graham was so pivotal in so many ways in so many of our lives, and she was one that would challenge us. Mm-hmm. She was constantly challenging herself, but she would always challenge us, and she always had the sweetest way of offering another perspective. And yeah, that was such anybody who's met my mom would say she had such a loving heart, and it was because she was so gentle and so kind. And I have to say that once Bayleigh got pregnant with this baby, it just felt like this blossoming, and like it's the new beginning, the new generation. Our family, like every dynamic in our family feels new, and it feels like there's been tremendous amount of healing. There feels like growth has happened.
We think about things as being past, present, future, or we even think about past life or future life or reincarnation, all these kind of things. That's just labels that I think we put on it, trying to understand or to explain to each other what we're talking about. But what that 3-month hiatus that y'all took, you weren't just killing, and we do this all the time in our life without even realizing it, probably even very simple events or things that we do, but I'm sure there was ancestral healing that took place, like you healed things from the past, you've probably healed things from in the future, and whatever spark or energy that this new child that's about to come into the world, whatever spark or energy it's bringing with it was part of that healing, whether we know what it is or why, but the healing that took place in that 3 months is what paved the way for this new energy to come in for further healing. And it's just it's exciting. I've got chills.
Okay, so I want to know, what is your mom now? Megan, what are you showing to the world now?
Bayleigh, how do you see your mom now versus
how do I see her now? I don't know. I feel like I've always seen her like as she is now. I've always kind of seen her as that way, and it's always the thing that's always killed me is that she's never had confidence in that way. And I've always seen her as just like this super like bright, outgoing, bubbly, like a little like it was so funny because she's like so wound full of energy all the time. And my entire life, I've always been a pretty level, like I can get ramped up, but I'm pretty level. And I remember at times whenever I was a kid, she'd be doing something. Like she'd come running up like pterodactyl football was something that she invented, or T-Rex football.
T-Rex football.
Yeah, and it's where she would put her arms in her shirt and she would run at us with her hands like this, and we would throw a football to her and she would try to catch it without it hitting her face. Like she would do shit like that my entire childhood, and I remember all the time I would just have moments where I'm like, yep, that's my mom. And so I was like always viewed her just as this wound up, like crazy, always down for a good time. Like never took her much to get anything going or get people involved and bring everybody, pull everybody in. And it's I've always viewed her as that, just this huge source of just being able to like bring everybody in and include everybody. And that's something I always really admired about her because I was always a little bit of an introvert. So like she'd always my friends would all be over and I'd be hitting this point where I'm like, oh my God, leave. Like please get out of my house and go away. I know I invited you here, but I'm done. And then she could always kind of pick up on that and she'd like, hey guys, let's go outside and go grass sledding, or have you ever milked a cow? Do you want to go and milk a cow? So I've always viewed her just as this beautiful source of energy and just always learning, always expanding and wanting to do things, and like definitely never saying no to a challenge. And yeah, she'd always have a project working on something, be out in the shop doing it, and you're always learning new things. And I always admired that, just kind of going along and following you, and you're always so full of energy. But yeah, seeing it now where she just fully is in that energy all the time. Whereas before it was like I'd see little glimpses of it. I couldn't even imagine what my childhood would be like if you were in this energy all the time, because it would have been nuts.
Megan, what was it when you showed up? What did you bring?
Well, I think a lot of it was I had a tremendous amount of self-doubt, and I was very, very much a people pleaser. So I would try to take care of everyone else's needs before my own. And went through a 17-year-long abusive marriage, and that really dims your light. And there were a lot of things that were said and spoken over me that I had to release and choose not to buy into it. I had to make a choice to let those things go. And then so many of them I thought I had. And then I found this new prayer life that I've experienced, where it's a meditative prayer, and it's a deepening. It's really getting in and getting comfortable sitting with myself. I remember one time in Costa Rica, I went down to eat breakfast, and part of me didn't want to go eat breakfast because I didn't want to sit at the table alone. And I was so not wanting to sit alone. And this is kind of why I made myself take this trip, is because I had a fear of traveling after mom had passed, and I had a fear of being alone. And so I was like, what do you do when you're scared of something? You just go do it. But now I've found that I actually quite enjoy going to dinner by myself. I love taking myself out on dates. I really enjoy and have thoroughly embraced that the things that I found that I crave externally from someone else, I have the capacity to give that to myself. And if I can't give that to myself, or if I'm unwilling to give that stuff to myself, how can I expect anyone else to do it if I can't do it for myself? Showing up for yourself, I cannot say enough about it. That really showing up for me and genuinely finding love and appreciation and gratitude for this person that I am even in all my faults, because I am by far not perfect. So not perfect. But some of those faults are what make me me. And it's what makes me goofy with my kids. And it's what makes me
a little spazzy.
It makes me give my friends the weirdest hugs. Like, I am all about these full body hugs that I give my girlfriends.
Yeah.
I am likely to give a little dance or a little shimmy as we hug, because I love hugging people. Yeah.
No, it was, yeah, it's so great to see you just like go into a room and just so unapologetically be yourself. And it's so great because like that hug that she was talking about, I have a great example of it. Cracks me up. Her friend Alicia loves it whenever she hugs her like that, but then her other friend Nancy is like, she's not like that at all. So my mom goes up to her friend and she gets all up in this hug and she's hugging her, and my mom's other friend is standing there and she's wide-eyed and she looks at her and she goes, honey, if you want to file a rape charge, we'll go file a rape charge. And my mom's friend looks at her and she goes, it's fine, I love it. It was so great because
I ask permission. Yeah. I have learned the power of asking permission before we do things. So,
but it was so great because like you 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been something like you would have read the dynamic and been like, okay, this friend is uncomfortable with this. I'm going to tone it down with this friend so that way we don't make this one uncomfortable. And honestly, when you just like authentically just jumped in and did it, the interaction was so much better because the shock on the one gal's face was just like, oh my gosh, I was standing there and I was just about dying. I was like, this was amazing. And so when you just showed up and you just did it, it allowed her to fully express how she was feeling, and it allowed the other gal to fully express how she was feeling. And it was so cool to see. And I just remember standing there and I was like, yeah, that was hilarious. I was like, also, yeah, we probably could have called the sheriff on that.
It was a little aggressive. That's
what I'm hearing though is, and what you shared, Bayleigh, is that when you open up and be your authentic self, it allows others to reflect back their authentic self.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So that is a concept. I have started holding women's circles, ceremonial circles for women in my community. And one of the things when we're opening up this space that I love to share with them is in life, we tend to hold ourselves back because we think that that's what is required of us. We should ourselves. I should be this. I should be that. I should do this. I should do that. I should hold myself to look like this because that's what all the women in my family look like. So we hold all these shoulds, but when you let go of the shoulds and you allow yourself to just authentically really love and embrace who you are, you sign a permission slip for the lady next to you and you basically hand it to her and say, I am capable of doing this. Here's your permission slip. Join me. And as you watch women handing those permission slips, if you share your insecurity, you share your fear, you're handing a permission slip to another woman to say, I also feel that way. And when we get vulnerable, when we share, when we allow, and when we step out of our own judgment of ourselves, it's amazing how unjudgmental other people are.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there judging yourself and holding yourself back, that's when people are like confused because they're trying to read you, but it's hard to read you when you can't even read yourself.
Yeah. And it's such a simple, when you say it, show up as your authentic self. And you hear that.
Who's that?
Yeah, exactly. And you hear that and you have so many questions where you're just like, who the hell? Like, what? Who is that person? And that's where, like, when you were talking about sitting alone and sitting by yourself, that's a huge step in it. And that's really like the only step in it, is to understand who your authentic self is to get really stupid uncomfortable with yourself and sitting alone and listening to what those are. And when you have those moments where it's like, I could do this, and it would feel so good for me, but there's that other person there, and it's taking those moments to go, I'm going to get super uncomfortable and I'm going to step out and do something that's going to make me feel really good instead of trying to protect that other person. It's not easy to do that, but it's addicting. I always tell everybody it is addicting when you start doing it and you start noticing those moments and you start acting on those moments. It does fire off something where it just gets so much easier the more that you practice it, but it definitely takes a lot of sitting.
Keyword there was practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because anything we do in life is a practice. Walking is a practice. We had to start somewhere. Talking is a practice. So when you're learning how to love yourself, when you're learning how to be gentle with yourself, you're learning how to be kind with yourself, it's a practice. And you're not always going to get it right the first time. You're going to forget. You're going to go back to your old habits because that's where your comfort, your muscle memory takes you there. And so the practice is just going, oh, hey, I'm more aware and I'm more apt to notice because I'm more aware. And so all it really is changing your awareness and then being kind and gentle with yourself each time that, if you need to correct it or you see yourself sliding back, it's okay. Just be kind, be gentle, acknowledge that you're doing it, acknowledge that you're at least aware of it, and then try to do better the next day.
Yeah. Giving yourself that grace, that space to be wrong, and or to be wrong, but that space to slip up, that space to learn.
Space to learn, space to be taught, and then tremendous gratitude.
Yeah, and that is huge because that was something that I learned from my mom. I learned how to learn. Like just how to accept it and just take on a new hobby. And if you really I can't tell you how many times we're out in the shop and she did not do cussing was not really a thing growing up. We really watched our language and everything. And we'd be out in the shop and she'd slip a bolt and punch an engine block or something. And she'd little cuss under her breath. And then and she'd turn and then she'd go back to it and she'd, okay, well, what do I have to do now? And but she never just never gave up on it, never quit. Or the woodworking was always a fun one because she'd go and hit with an impact driver, and she built things to get hit by hurricanes. Probably could have used a bucket of screws less on some stuff, but it was always such beautiful work. But oh yeah, she'd have pocket holes, double the amount of pocket holes drilled in for a tabletop or something. And it was yeah, you could bolt this sucker down and it would never move. It was very, very solid whenever she would woodwork, but it was so funny whenever she'd be going along doing something and you'd hear the drill start to impact and then she'd she'd take her a little minute and I'd remember the door would open up and then she'd stand outside and then she'd step back in and okay, well, I'm going to go buy wood glue because I don't feel like rebuilding this entire thing. So it was learning how to learn that. And then I got the contrast side of it from my dad because he was very unable to learn new skills and to let himself be bad at new skills. I can't even tell you how many times he would start a new hobby and I'd be so excited to follow him along. And then about 10 minutes in, there'd just be this anger and this frustration that he couldn't allow himself to finish learning it. And he couldn't allow himself to make those mistakes. And so getting that stark contrast between the two parents was so unique because it really did put into perspective oh, you have a choice. You can show up and be clumsy with something and guess what? You're still going to go to bed at night. You're still going to wake up in the morning. Doesn't matter. You learn something new from it. Or, you can choose to be angry and frustrated with it and not act on it and not know where it's going to take you. And so it was definitely a balance, being a kid and not having the ability to put that kind of stuff into words. It was really hard. And now that my brain is fully developed, it's shrunk a little bit because I'm pregnant, but it's still still working for the most part. But once it finally clicked and I could really put terms and I could put words to things and I could connect those dots, I really got looking at it and I was like, wow, I had a stark contrast childhood that really made me who I am and really helped me. Just it sucked at times, but boy, it landed me in such a great spot because it was so many lessons that I feel like I got to learn at such a young age that by the time I was finally fully functioning in my brain, all those lessons clicked up pretty quick that it was like, oh, okay, I don't have to necessarily beat this drum again. I already learned this. Like I already watched somebody do this. But that ability to just let go and learn is huge. And when you can do it in like kind of an academic sense, sort of, in like material worlds, your crafts, whatever your projects are, but then to be able to do it internally and look at it in your own heart and in your own mind and apply that same concept to yourself, that's when life starts to just fire off in such crazy ways.
Yeah.
Because that grace is much needed when you're going through your awakenings and going through your processes and relearning things.
Well, and I've got to sit with that concept of being unapologetic with your authenticity
Mm-hmm.
while still respecting boundaries of other people. There is that but I think I, like so many women, was more concerned with respecting other people's boundaries, that I'm not always authentic with how I want. I'm an authentic person most of the time, but like I do hide who I am sometimes to keep peace in the situation, or
And
I like because I don't want to outshine anybody else. But y'all just gave me permission to shine my light.
Do it. Yeah.
Sunglasses on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the goal in the world right now, right? Is to like raise the vibration and raise the frequency and to all kind of just help shine that light and be that light. And if we continually dim it for other people, how are we going to, where are all of our lighthouses going to go?
Yeah. Well, when you get dismissive of yourself, you dismiss other people around you. Yeah.
And I think sometimes I'm so concerned about not offending people that I end up offending people.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like a double-edged sword a little bit. Yeah.
That's the thing with fears or with fears or concerns is when we operate in that frequency, you attract that back to yourself. So it's realizing that things are so magnetic, and if you allow yourself to sit in that state, it is what you're going to get. And it's what you're going to experience, because that's where your awareness is going to take you to notice.
That's a good takeaway from
you. To Bayleigh, are you moving to Montana?
Yeah, so we've been on quite the journey this last year. We're in Portland right now, and we're currently living with my husband's family, with his parents, until the baby's born, and then we'll live with them postpartum for a little while, just for the extra support. And then we've got all of our stuff packed up in a cargo trailer in the yard right now. And so we'll be moving back over to Montana, and it'll be my mom, my brother, me, my husband, and our new baby living together. So
Megan.
Yes.
So you're an energetic healer. Is that correct?
Yep. I'm in Stevensville. Stevensville, Montana. And I'm actually setting up a really cool space in our really cool old creamery building. There's a beautiful space, and there's some extra room. So I think that's Krista and I have been talking about working on, I've got a few projects going, but I'll be setting up my Reiki practice there, and then also offering some coaching and life life mentorship programs through that. So
yeah,
I feel a trip to Montana coming on before too long.
Yes,
this would definitely be awesome to do this in person. This would be super fun.
So if someone wants to follow along with y'all's journey, if you want to put yourself out there, how can someone follow along with what's going on with you guys?
Oh, I would say probably Instagram is probably the best way. I'm kind of bad about it. I'll go through like a month hiatus where I won't post and then I'll post again and be like, have a couple weeks of pretty steady. Yeah, probably Instagram's probably the best way.
I'm definitely Instagram, Facebook right now. I'm in the process, with moving in transitioning careers now that haven't quite got everything set up, but we have some fun stuff in the works that we're going to be working on, and I have a feeling we'll be talking to you ladies a few more times in the future. So.
Absolutely.
So your contact information, we'll put your Instagram, your social handles in the show notes, and
great.
It's definitely not our last conversation.
We just got one scoop out of the ice cream. I'm talking about a gallon that.
When you said this story, I was like, oh, but there's a lot.
I know, we were talking beforehand and she was like, she typed out her bio and it was like probably a paragraph and a half long, which this is our dynamic. She'll write a full book and then I'm like, okay, now let's summarize.
And then she just deletes it. Yeah. She just deletes whole sentences in no qualm. She just deletes. And I'm like,
ruthless.
Wow.
So we were talking about it now and I was like, the conversation will go where we go. And she's like, do you want to go over the questions? I'm like, the conversation's gonna go where it's gonna go. She's like, well, what do you think we should bring this up and this up? I said, I'm pretty sure that's gonna come up. If it's meant to come up, that'll come up. It was definitely really fun. Preparing for this together was definitely fun. But
one last little mother-daughter thing before the new baby.
Yeah, it definitely was.
We're definitely very excited for this baby and very just so grateful to be doing this a more conscious, more aware, more
in tune. In tune with
so much more in tune. And I'm so excited for the labor process because it's just, I know that it's just like death. You don't walk away from it. Nobody walks away from that experience feeling the same way.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
But
the baby's coming one way or the other.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no stopping this.
The train's on the track.
Well, guys, thanks for sharing your journey with us, and I think we'll be hearing more about it.
Yeah.
And thank you for trusting us to actually share your story.
Well, thank you for thank you for creating this space and a platform to share it on. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time now, so it's kind of one of those synchronicities of how things happen. So thank you guys.
To be with us, not just listening, but to participate in the conversation. Well, we will let y'all go and get ready for the upcoming weekend. And
I know.
Thank you.
Ready to sign off?
Yeah.
I know. I'd chat with you guys all day.
So
we'd never get off the phone. Yeah, we'll see you guys again.
All right. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent.